Hey, Matt.
I'm not joking. I will kill
I
somebody.
need to change.
Yo, what's up, guys?
Hey, I got to
Hey.
tell you, I figured out today that Seth is your brother.
Talking to me?
Yes. You have a
How do
brother
you
named
know-
Seth.
How do you know Seth?
He works for my framer.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did he just start kind of recently?
A couple of months.
Yeah?
Yes.
Cool. I know he changed jobs not too long ago, so
Yeah. He does a good job. He's a good kid. I like him.
yeah, he is fun. He actually called me
I-
earlier.
I liked him before I knew he was related to you. So
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I'll have to. Does he know you like made the connection?
yeah. So I was telling him about something we did at Rise. He's like, "Wait a minute, is this at Rise?" And I'm like, "Yes." And he's like, "Yeah, Austin's my brother." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Well, that's rad. Way cool. He called me not too long ago. We just had Marty and his family over for dinner actually, and Seth called, and hey, I wonder if that's what he was calling me to tell me. So yeah, very cool. How are you guys all today?
Hanging in
Good.
there.
Yeah. I shaved my beard. I got
I was
inspired by
say, Dave, you're looking good, man. Looking good, Dave.
I shaved it and I was like, oh, I think I went too short. So
Man, you look good.
thanks. I think my wife likes it better. So plus mine's not very thick. It feels like kind of scraggly when it gets long. So whatever. Jared, what's up? Dave, how are you?
Doing well. How are you guys?
Am I cool enough yet to call you Ox? I hear that's the word on the street.
The only one who calls me that's Marty. So that actually was my brother's nickname. So that's okay.
Cool. Cool. Jared, I liked your watermelon crushing.
Oh, yeah. That was a blast. The kids loved it. They were super excited.
Nice. Dave, how you been, man?
Good. No complaints.
Awesome. I like your trees in the back there.
Thanks.
I mean,
It's a big, crazy yard to take care of, but it works.
yeah, I bet the fall's fun with leaves, huh?
Oh yeah, in cotton season. Yes.
Jason, how are you doing, man? It's on mute.
Sorry, I had to come off mute.
You're
Doing
all right.
good. Doing really good.
Yeah, what's been going on for you?
Oh, not a whole lot. Just working, and we're working on trying to get our basement finished. So that's been taking up most of our time, trying to plan that out and get subcontractors and all that fun stuff that we got to do. So,
Jeez, sweet.
yeah.
Hugh, how are you doing?
Doing good. I'm just driving home right now with the family. So I'll kick on my video in just a minute. Oh, I guess my video is on.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. My
Very
wife was
cool.
handling the phone, so yeah. So I'll jump back on here in a second when I unload the troop here.
Cool. So I'll tell you guys, there's no official announcement or date, but I've been working on the women's equivalent of Rise Week. It's totally different, totally different, but I'm pretty excited about it. It's funny because I've spent probably more time like in individual therapy with women than I have with men when it comes to like individual and trauma and stuff like that. And it's been cool to kind of put that together with, what can help women. So yeah, well, I'll keep you posted on that. But I think my wife's gonna she was nervous, and I was like, you got this. Like, we'll work together on creating it, and I'll be there to help out. But eventually, I'll just step out of it and let her and probably Yella's wife's gonna help with it, and so it should be cool. So let's dive into corrective experiences. You guys, everybody game for that? That's why we're here, yeah? So first off, the concept of corrective experiences, I read this term in two different places. One is in a pretty high level trauma therapy called attachment focused EMDR. And the other place is emotionally focused couples therapy that is also based in attachment. And I'll talk a little bit about attachment today. We talked a little bit at Rise Week. But in both books, it talks about for healing to happen on a relational level, and really even on an individual level, it needs to be an experience that's opposite of the negative thing, that changes the emotional aspect of it. And so Rise Week is built on this principle of a corrective emotional experience. You guys don't have to comment necessarily, but think of the things that were impactful at Rise Week. Probably quite a few of those concepts you'd heard before, but Rise Week, we helped you experience it. So Dave, right, for you in the truck, we had already all talked about negative core beliefs and the messages we tell ourselves, right? But when we put you in the driver's seat and creating an experience around it, it makes it more real, right? And it starts to actually shift our neurology and begin to heal links where when we just learn it cognitively, we got some good information, but we don't hold it. But when we experience it, it starts to rewrite it in the unconscious mind, and then it changes the way we see things in the future. And so this idea of corrective emotional experiences is something I want to talk about creating in your marriages, with your children. And it doesn't mean you have to go like buy a bunch of masks and dress up as the shiny guy and all that stuff. A lot of this is engaging in conversation where, for example, I'll just take me and Shaylee. We've been in situations where it's like the same struggle, the same fight, the same dialogue, the same flooded emotions. And as I learned in her, as we learned different ways to interact, we can talk about that same struggle, and we can become vulnerable, or we can shift the tone of voice, or we can show compassion instead of justice, right? And we might be talking about a situation in the past, but we're having a new experience around that thing, and it begins to heal things. So you guys obviously know my struggle with addiction and the things that I did that created betrayal and created trauma. Me being able to go to her and genuinely say, like, I see how this affected you, and right, for her to feel that I feel pain because I caused her pain, that's an experience that's a lot different than like, hey, I told you I was sorry, 3 months ago. And so some of you guys started this on the mountain on day 4, writing a letter, starting to think about situations that maybe your wife or your kids or yourself had felt pain around, but you never handled it with this intention to shift the experience. So I'm going to dive in this deeper, but I actually want to ask, does anybody have any specific questions or even specific scenarios that we can just, I'll kind of talk about it with that specific scenario. What's up, Adam?
What's up, Adam?
Okay, so I'll just, I'm going to go into this, okay? So you guys can take a few notes on this if you want, okay? But I'm going to start with attachment, okay? Attachment in a relationship is the bond between, let's call it husband and wife. It's also the bond between parent and child. And there's these, what they call core attachment needs. Okay. And you guys have heard me talk about this at Rise Week. It's this idea of, am I acceptable? Am I acceptable? Do I belong? Can I get comfort and care? So these are the ABCs: acceptance, belonging, comfort and care, and then safety. Do I feel these things in this relationship? Okay. Acceptance, belonging, comfort, care, safety. So I want to feel those things in my relationships where I can be me. That's where people tend to be more vulnerable, is when it feels safe. And so you look at like what you guys created at Rise Week. You created this space where it was safe to be real, where people felt safe to be courageous in sharing some difficult things or to let themselves be seen. Okay. And then in this relationship, we also want to know that our people are accessible. Okay. Are you there for me? Okay. Accessible. And then are you responsive? Okay. So I see that you have time. I see that you're home. When I ask for a need or a desire, do you respond? Okay. Accessible, responsive. And then the third one is, are you engaged in my well-being? Okay. In my experience, this engaged in well-being is one of the fundamental things that is missing for a lot of relationships, whether husband and wife or parent-child. And it's more of like, I'm over here and my people are over there, and I'm proactively going to them before they express a need, and I'm showing interest. Hey, how was your day? Well, you know, what are you liking about baseball or basketball? Tell me about your friends. Like, I'm interested. I'm not just over here available, and if you come to me, I'll respond. And so looking at this in your relationships, right, we talked about this. How can I be proactive in being engaged in my, you know, my partner or my kids' well-being? And so when we look at this corrective experience in a marriage, it is this idea, especially for those of you that have caused some sort of damage, which probably is all of us, right, at some point. It's this ability to come forward and say, hey, I've just been thinking about some of the things we've gone through and some of the things that you felt, and I just want you to know that I care, or I'm curious. I'm interested in knowing what I can do to be a better spouse for you, or what I can do to ease your burden. Like, this doesn't have to be all about traumatic things. This shouldn't just be a day-to-day, like, little thought. For example, like Shaylee's told me, like, I'll occasionally, you know, grab her favorite candy bar at the grocery store. And it's just me showing that I'm thinking of her. I took the time to get something she liked, bring it to her, and I'm engaged in her well-being. And as I meet with women, by and large, this is the number one thing, this feeling like he's thinking of me, he's interested in me. When it comes to the healing aspect of a relationship, what happens a lot of times is a man will sincerely apologize, but a woman won't get the sense that he understands the pain. And so Sue Johnson, she's kind of one of the top gurus in couples therapy. In her research, working with both men and women who have been hurt in a relationship, she says healing comes in a relationship when, let's just take us men, for example. We've created some pain where we can get compassionate enough to go, maybe I didn't mean to cause you pain. Maybe I even don't think that what I did should have caused you pain, right? If we can go, okay, that's irrelevant. My partner's in pain, and I care about them enough that I'm actually sad that they're in pain, and I can go and show that. So what Sue Johnson says, she says, when a partner feels, in this case a wife, when a wife feels that a husband sees her pain and is pained because she's in pain, that's what alleviates it. And where most people get lost is they get in a debate of, should this or shouldn't this have hurt you? Was this my intention or wasn't it? And a lot of that's irrelevant. And so when I'm doing couples therapy, I'm trying to create an experience in my office where a couple's having a dialogue, and instead of being reactive and, you know, passive aggressive, they're going deeper into that compassion and they're sharing, I see that I hurt you, or I see that you're sad, and I want to be here for you. And I don't always know what to do, but I love you. That being there in the pain is actually what heals it more than, I need you to do the dishes more often, or like this upper top level stuff. Okay. Questions so far, or thoughts that you guys have? It's making sense?
Yeah, it's making sense. The question I had is, how do you go about doing that when it's a subject or a topic that you're dealing with that is a little bit painful for you as well? We had an experience this weekend on our drive, talking about adoption stuff again, and every time we bring up that conversation, it triggers both of us pretty hard.
Right.
And it gets to the point where both of us just both turn negative about it because each other are not understanding one another.
Right.
How do you get to that point where you're compassionate enough to understand what the other one's feeling and maybe going through, but also still not let it affect you and what you need back out of the conversation? Or maybe that's a different topic and we're not there yet.
No, I think you're on track. I mean, this could be any number of topics for any of us. I think, and this is, I'm going to call it a skill set. I think it is this space. For me, it ties into trust. Okay, does this person love me? Do we want the other to be happy? If yes, for example, let me understand you first. You know, I genuinely want to understand you more than I want to be understood. And so help me understand how you see this or how you feel about this. And it's not a debate thing. It's not I'm thinking of my counterpoints while you're sharing yours, right? And it is a recognition of some of the things you're saying are gonna like smack me in the face because I totally disagree. But right now I'm gonna worry about understanding you. And so often that it requires curiosity. And so it might be, okay, I'm not getting that. So when this happens, what else? Or, when this happens for you. Oh, I get that. And you still may not agree, but I think the goal here is this curiosity and understanding. And then there's a place to share. I feel, this way about it, but what's our end goal, right? Like, what are we trying to get to here? And I went backwards, I went up. Like, I think, what's our end goal? We both want to feel loved. At the deepest core, we both want something positive. And even if we don't see the same way to get there, are we still together? And obviously, I'm not using specifics in this situation. But I think as husbands, that's where we can start. Some of you may recognize that you're more of a withdrawer in your relationship and you're like, I don't want to talk about it. And others, you're the pursuer and you want to talk about it a bunch. When I'm doing couples therapy, part of my first goal is to engage the withdrawer. So I'm asking the person that primarily withdraws, I want to understand them. And the trick of this in couples therapy is I'm getting the understanding in front of the partner. And the partner's hearing it and going, I never knew any of this stuff because I don't get flooded because it's not my stuff, right? And so I just almost get this conversation happening in front of the partner. And I offer some type of, oh, okay, I understand that. And then what I'll say, do you ever tell your partner this part of it? And they'll go, no, I don't. And I'll say, do you ever hear this side of it? And the partner will go, no. I'll go, what do you think? Well, when he says it like that, now I totally get it, right? This is a skill set in a couple, is to find this place where we're not getting flooded by the emotion and we're trying to get to the core. Does that help a little bit? I mean, it sounds simple, but it's a lot of curiosity. It's this genuine desire to understand more than to be understood, which anybody get lost in that sometimes, that desire to be understood first? So I think Stephen Covey, one of his 7 principles, isn't it seek first to understand, then to be understood? Does that sound familiar? Is that helpful, Matt?
Yeah, no, I think it definitely was. And started to go down that direction of trying to be curiosity until she said something that then triggered me to be pissed off instantly and want to shut the conversation down.
Right.
And so we were able to kind of push through that, but it still was not a comfortable conversation and didn't quite go as far as it should have or could have. But
you know, one of the things Shayla and I, we don't do this all the time, but when we do it, it works really well, is we start with what our hopes are of the conversation. So her or I will say something like, hey, I want to talk with you about something's difficult. And my hope is that we can come out feeling more connected, more, you know, aligned, more a team. And when we start with that intention, then it doesn't feel threatening. It doesn't feel like we're going to war, right? It feels like we're a team trying to figure something out together. And it's kind of this idea of we're united against the old pattern. So we've had conversations where we're like, we both know how this can go negative. I do this and you say that, then I trigger, then I trigger you, then we're fighting, then we're right. Like we know that. And so we just try to bypass it. Let's try to not go into this old thing, and let's do this as a loving couple. Let's handle this conversation from connectedness. Sometimes I think it's valuable to connect before a conversation, like express love, express care, and then go, we need to work this out together. Let's not go into this as enemies. Let's go into this as husband and wife trying to resolve something. I think just starting that way can calm things quite a bit.
And I think that's where we went, and I realized it as soon as we started the conversation, is we weren't really prepared to have a conversation like that. We literally were just finishing dinner, got in the car, went for a drive, and the conversation gradually led to that topic. And I was driving, she was upset, kind of motion sickness because we're driving through the canyon on top of it. And so it really just was a firestorm all at once. And so yeah, that's good to make sure we're both in the right mind space.
I think when you know it's topics that traditionally are a struggle, like be intentional. Like I'm guilty of this. We've had a ton of conversations that neither of us had intentions to have, and we have it when we're flooded or we're upset. And then we're saying things that we're not even thinking through. It's just like our minds are just like, right? And so a lot of what we talk about at Rise Week is how do I be intentional? So me and Shaylee learned to handle certain aspects of our marriage that we could never get right. And it was like, okay, next Tuesday, let's talk about sex. Or next Thursday, let's talk about the kids, or right? And so it's kind of this intentional thing. The other thing that I found, so me and Shaylee really struggle with conversations over the phone. Honestly, something in her voice I misread and I trigger. It's interesting, the statistics on this are when we are doing communication, it's only 7% of the actual words is what we listen to. 55% is body language, and the other percentage, I don't know what that math is tone of voice. And so I see people fight all the time through text or through email, and all you're getting is words. You're reading into the tone and there's no body language. And so, we're running it through our filter and we're misunderstanding. And so I'm a big fan of, especially the difficulties, especially the past hurts, let's make it intentional. So, hey, I don't know if you're in a good spot, but I'd really like to talk to you sometime this week about and my hope is you can feel loved by me and we can resolve this in a way that we haven't in the past. That sets the stage totally differently. Does that make sense, guys? So this concept of corrective experiences, part of it also doesn't have to be a conversation. Part of it is just enjoying time together. So for example, me and Shaylee have had a lot of talks about affection, a lot of talks about intimacy, and all those talks, I would say maybe like 10% helped us feel better versus one of us taking the effort to just create a space where affection or intimacy was working. And so rather than just talking about the solution, actually trying to create that. So let's say your partner doesn't feel safe with you because of something you did, or she's not trusting you, or she's hurt. right? We can talk endlessly through it, and that may or may not help. Or we can show up differently. We can show up confident. We can show up humble. We can show up kind, and let them experience something different with us. So anybody go home from Rise Week and your wife could just like feel like you were different? She could like sense it or something like that? Yeah? So, right, you're showing up with a different energy. You're in a different emotional state. So a lot of times if I can just come home more confident or more loving. Sometimes we still may have a quick conversation, but it's a totally different conversation. It's like, hey, I know I messed up earlier, or I know we got frustrated, and I just want you to know I love you, and I just want us to like have a great night together. And oftentimes she's like, yeah, me too. And we don't have to rehash through stuff. And so this is part of what we talked at Rise Week is, can I get into a different state and show up in that state? Sometimes it might be better to be a little flirty or a little playful, or think outside the box, than to try to rehash areas that aren't working. Does that make sense? Any thoughts with that? Any experience with that? I can be quiet all day, guys.
Yeah, I think that made sense for sure.
So, Dave, I've noticed you, just from your pictures, you're showing up, you're engaging, right? How is that affecting things?
Well, it's been a huge positive impact just for me personally. Obviously, Katie's noticed. The girls notice. They expect me home from work earlier now, which is awesome. And it's becoming, for the first few days, I had to really think about it. Like, what am I going to do? What am I, trying to plan it out in my mind. But it's becoming more natural that when I come home, I'm just sitting down with the girls or grabbing them and taking them somewhere and, thinking about what we want to do the next time we're together. So it's becoming more natural than forced, I guess. Not necessarily forced, but, a real effort the first few times. So it's been super positive.
Right. So, right, it's a new experience. It's different, and that experience starts to become healing. It builds trust when it's like, oh, I can count on this connection, or I can count on this, kindness or level of love. Is it all right, Kelly, if I share a few things about what I see with you?
Yeah, that's fine.
So one of the things Kelly's done really great with his wife is they'll talk about hard things, and she'll express like the pain of that. And Kelly will respond with sorrow that happened however long ago. And while he can't change that it happened, she still experienced it and still has some pain from it. And when he's genuine and says, I know I wasn't there before, but I want to be here now, right? That's a different experience, because what she experienced in the past and what she believed in the past was, I can't access him, he's not there for me, kind of thing. And now her experience is, whoa, you are here for me? You do see me, you do care for me? And little by little, that starts to bring down the wall, that starts to help her feel safer, and then she can start to let him in a little more. And that's the simplicity of this corrective experience. It's a different interaction than the way it used to be. And what's cool about our minds, we say that in trauma therapy, we say trauma tags trauma, which means when something traumatic happens now, it actually activates all the things that we've experienced in the past that are similar. We use this analogy of like, right, a cup of water, and I can do one drop of food coloring and it colors the whole experience. Trauma and pain can do that, so can connection. So a little dose of connection, a little dose of sincerity, a little dose of care, it activates that part in the brain and people start to feel better. So I often tell people every opportunity is a chance to connect or disconnect. And a lot of you heard me talk of that idea of the old radio, right? I got to dial in to where they are. And if I can come to this spot and show care and show love, that's where we can connect. And then we can change stations together. But if I'm over here and it's like, hey, why can't you come out of your sadness or your victim and be happier? We're not together. So I got to come to this spot. I got to tune in, care what's happening, love, and then together we can move. Does that make sense, guys? And so I want to frame this as a skill set that we want to develop. It's not a one-time thing, and I think it's something as a brotherhood we should work on. I mean, Shaylee and I got off track this weekend. I mean, in all honesty, I came back from Rise Week pretty wasted emotionally and physically, and then I left to town again for a 5-day training, and I got back, and I wasn't as present as I want to be, and I reacted, and it kind of like, not terribly, but it created something between us. I had to do the same thing. Come back yesterday and say, hey, I've been a little off. I've not been there for you. I love you. What can I do? And we talked through it, and it ended with a connection and here's what we do in the future thing. So this is going to be an ongoing skill set because couples disconnect. We step on each other's toes. And not going into like a panic emergency of like, we disconnected, the sky's falling. It's like, okay, we disconnected, neither of us wanted it. We know how to come back together. In the attachment language, we call it building a bridge. Okay, we disconnected and now there's this thing between us. I'm gonna start to build a bridge from my side and go, hey, I love you and I'm sorry. I love you too, I'm sorry. I'll try to do better in the future. That'd be really helpful. Me too, right? And we build a bridge back to each other. And inevitably, because we're human, okay, we get these things between us again. And if we have this skill set of building a bridge, over time we don't disconnect as often or in the same ways. Thoughts with this? Questions?
Can I add something about Lisa and some of those experiences?
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, honestly, I didn't remember. Some of them I didn't think were a big deal. Some of them were so many years ago that I'm amazed she remembers. But none of that mattered.
Right.
It was just about acknowledging that it felt bad for her.
Right. Yeah. Because, right, that idea of perception is reality, and we can debate someone's reality, but it doesn't shift it. So if we try to understand that reality and show love and care, it kind of loosens things up. And then we can say, oh, I wasn't in that, I didn't know it was affecting you that way. I didn't mean to do that. I want to go back, if it's okay, to this idea of like the drop of connection, okay? There's a really cool study they did, and they've duplicated it, where there's a few, but this study, they put women who reported, they were asked, like, what's the, level of connection in your relationship, right? Some women it was high, some women it was low. But they took these women and they put them in an MRI, and they hooked them up to an electric shock, I think on their foot or something like that. And they rigged this thing so it would create anxiety. So inside the MRI, I think it was a green circle, and if they saw the green circle, 20% of the time they were going to get electrocuted, shocked, okay? So it heightens anxiety, so they can see in the brain scan, the brain's in anxiety, and then periodically there's this shock, and they rated it. How painful on a scale of, 1 to 10, right? And so these women are like, that's painful, it's like a 9, don't, it hurts kind of thing, right? And in one of the studies, they brought in a stranger, and they had the stranger just put their hand on the other person, okay? On the woman, okay? And they did the same thing, and the brain was more calm. And when they asked how painful, they said like 4 or 5, okay? Then brought in the women's husbands, and they did the same study. And the women who felt connected to their husbands, they reported it didn't hurt at all. And the brain scan showed it wasn't activating that pain center. The women who didn't feel connected to their husbands, the stranger was better. Like they felt the 10 again. And they took this study and they duplicated it. And what they realized was emotional pain is felt the same as physical pain. But when we're connected to someone else, it calms it. And the brain doesn't read it as much. And so when people are going through trauma and they feel like they have somebody to go through it with them, they get through the trauma much more quickly. They have less trauma. But when we are going through hard things and we're all alone, it's like double. It's more painful. It's more traumatic, right? And so learning, how do we be there for our partners? And honestly, how do we let them in? In my eyes, the goal of a relationship is, let's be in this thing called life together. I've said this thing to people before, where it's like, if life is happy and good, like I want people there with me, but I don't need it. Like life's happy and good, like I got it, right? But when life is hard, right? When we're going through challenges, when we're going through infertility, or when we have a kid in the hospital, or when there's addiction or whatever, that's when we need people, is when it's hard. And so often what we find ourselves is when it's hard, we're alone. You men have experienced that for yourselves going through hard things, and probably can recognize ways where your wives have felt that way as well. And so in my eyes, the idea is, let's bring this back together and say, hey, we're still facing some stuff. I don't want to do it alone anymore. And I don't want you to have to do it alone anymore. Let's be a team. Thoughts with that? You, what do you think, my man?
Sorry, you're asking me, Austin?
Yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
I totally agree. When you have that connection, I know when my wife and I, we talk daily, and we try to really communicate every night before going to sleep. We'll just have a little conversation, checking in on the day and such. And when you are connected, it does makes a huge difference. My anxiety levels when we are, like when she gets home from work, my anxiety levels will go down because we are more connected. And so it totally rings true.
Who's ever heard this idea of I see you, I am you? Anybody familiar with that? I learned this from a therapist I used to work with. We used to run this intensive for couples. We would take 4 couples, they'd come in from wherever, and we did this intensive thing with them. And he shared this thing that him and his wife do. They have 8 kids. He's a director of a clinic, pretty busy guy. But they do this thing when he comes home from work, they spend just 20 seconds looking each other in the eye, right? He didn't teach me I see you, I am you, okay? But he taught me what happens when we look at someone in the eye. We see them. And I started to realize, like, all the time, Shaylee are in proximity, or me and my kids, and I don't see them. And so we have conversations, and like sometimes it'll start out on the couch, and I'm, she comes up and talks to me, and I'm on the computer or whatever. And what I've done is I'm shutting this, and I'm going to turn, I'm going to look in your eyes, and I'm going to see a human being, not just hear words. Right? I do this with my kids, where I get down on their level, and it's like, I see them, I look in their eyes, and it shifts something in me where it's not this object that I'm talking to. It's like a person, right? And I've had this times where I'm talking to this woman I love, and I'm treating her like worse than a stranger because I'm not focused, or I'm getting upset by her words, right? And as I learn to see her, my interaction is totally different. And so that's one of the things I encourage. Look your wife in the eyes, go see her. I work with a lot of couples around intimacy things, and we're being sexual and we're not seeing each other. We don't look at each other in the eye, we don't see each other, right? And so inviting this intimacy into your marriage, into your relationship with your kids, where it changes things. Like, I don't know, when I look at my 2-year-old, when I look in his eyes, it's like, man, this is a special person. And he can't communicate, but like, I see him as more than just a little baby, right? I had an experience with my oldest boy, James, when he was brand new baby, like looking in his eyes, and I was like, this is a better spirit than me. Like, I get to be his dad to teach me, not because I have anything great to offer. Like, this boy is here to teach me because I just felt that because I was looking in his eyes, you know? And so I encourage that this week, like have that experience of being seen and seeing those you love.
Hey, Austin.
Yep, go ahead.
Something that I think is pretty awesome. Like, I love that dude so much, by the way. Oh, that's money. That might be why I'm on the call, to be honest. When you do that, I'm curious because I think the answer is yes, but I don't want to like put that in your mouth. When I have done that, which isn't near enough, it seems like inspiration whispers something true to you about that person too.
Right.
Is that a collaborative experience? Is that something that you would agree with?
Yeah, you know, they say that the eyes are the window to the soul. That's the thing I hear. It not even in the religious community. I hear that in the therapeutic world a lot. Eyes are the windows to the soul. When I'm helping someone with whether it's trauma or whatever, and I can see in their eyes, I can see something, right? This concept that we talk about at Rise of I see you, like that's, I mean, you guys saw each other, right? You saw past the bad or the, you know, failures or the whatever, and it was like, I see you for who you really are, someone with a great heart, with a great desire. And I don't think you guys by day 4 were judging each other by any of your past, right? It's like, can we take that into our day-to-day lives with those we love? You know, like, you know, my work's a little unique because it's this, right? But like in your careers, can you go see people? And I talked about this at the most recent Rise Week. And I'm not perfect at this, but especially at Rise Week, it's like I see the potential of, it's a fundamental belief that people are good and they're blocked by something, typically pain from their past or shame or whatever. And when I can hold on to that and not see people through their behavior or their past or whatever, right? And this includes my wife. Like, I can fall into judgment and rigidity, but like when I can hold on to that perspective of like, this is a good person that's been through a lot and I've put them through a lot, it changes things for sure. So Dave W., what are your thoughts?
Thought I would sneak by without you guys recognizing me there for a minute. I don't know, I was thinking about this, and that's actually one of the first things I did when I came home, as maybe, well, once my family came home, because I came home to the empty house.
Right.
But I like grabbed my wife and I just looked in her eyes. And that was, I mean, just kind of as you said, it was a really cool experience, and I haven't done it nearly enough since then. But part of it for me was not seeing her, because I feel like I've seen her. It was an opportunity for her to see me.
Right.
And, you know, there's so many times where, like, I will make eye contact or we'll talk, and not even about anything really deep or significant, I feel like, and I'll just, you know, be engaged in something different. I'm just kind of waiting for a conversation to end, but being able to make that eye contact and not just like, hey, I'm making proper speaking etiquette eye contact, but actually like looking at each other and in her eyes.
Right.
It makes that connection when I'm feeling flooded by emotion, when we're having a hard conversation.
Right.
Kind of what you were talking about at the beginning, you know, me and Kari, we'll get into like these cycles where we'll talk about something and get excited, and then it dies, and then we get mad and then the cycle just starts over. And
Right.
but actually engaging her in that, like looking in her eyes, there's like a shift that happens, and now it's kind of like this whole thing we've been talking about. I don't want the cycle to begin again. I want to, whatever we're talking about, that's what we're gonna do. Like whatever it takes, we're gonna do it. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Awesome. You know, as you were talking about that, it brought to mind, like most of the time, if in the past when Shaylee and I have fought, we're not seeing each other. We're not seeing each other. We're just going with our heads. And so when we come back is how it plays out. We come back and we're intentional. We see each other and it calms things. The last thing I want to talk about with this idea of corrective experiences is with ourselves, right? So I think Rise Week for most of us is this place where we see ourselves differently. We experience ourselves differently, right? How many of you experienced an aspect of your strength that you hadn't tapped into for a long time, right? Pushing yourself, right? So you experience your strength, you experience your confidence, you experience your vulnerability, right? I remember literally for a long time, I couldn't look in the mirror, or I couldn't look in the mirror without like disgust, right? It was like, oh, right? And I had to start learning to have experiences with myself where I was being compassionate, I was being loving, I was comforting myself for the things that I had experienced that were hard, and being understanding that out of those hard things, I made mistakes and I developed beliefs and habits and behaviors that weren't helping me. And I think of one in particular. I had relapsed and Shaylee asked me to leave the house, not in an angry way, but she said, you're not you and you need to go find you. And I left and I stayed at my sister's for about a week. And I remember like I was in this big victim spot of like, like I'm a good person and why can't I get it together? And it's not my fault and my childhood and all this stuff, right? And I remember sitting down with a pen and paper and I wrote out all the negative, like everything bad that had happened to me, everything as a kid, everything as an adult. I wrote the stuff that was hard in my marriage, and it was like this list, right? And I had focused a lot on that stuff. Like I had focused a lot on my own pain and this victim thing. And then I wrote all the good that I had experienced, all the love, all the kindness, all the friendship, all the cool experiences, right? And I kind of had these two things, and it was like, there's just so much more good. And yeah, these things are hard and whatever, but like it's not all bad. Like I got a lot of good stuff going for me. And in that, one of the most valuable things is I could see not just what had happened to me, but I could see like the bad, like the things that I was, felt guilty about. But then I could see like all this good stuff. I was like, okay. And Marty, we talked about this idea of like probably 95% of the time, maybe 99%, I'm doing pretty good stuff, right? But I judge myself and get down on myself based on that smaller percentage. And for me, that was a corrective emotional experience with myself. It was like taking those lenses off and not just seeing the pain, but seeing the whole thing and going, it's not all bad. It's actually, there's a lot of good. And that specific exercise was actually really healing with my relationship with my dad, because I had this narrow thing of what I didn't get from him. But then I saw all the stuff I did get, and it like outweighed the negative. It was like, you know what? There was a lot of love, and there was a lot of kind experiences, and there was a lot of, and it expanded my vision, and I experienced something different, something healing. And so I invite you guys to keep these corrective experiences going personally, relationally. This will be a theme that we talk about. And who felt something shift within them when we did some of those like guided visualizations at Rise Week? So, right, that's just the internal experience with yourself. And so I'm working on making those more available, so you can tap into that and kind of experience yourself differently, experience the way you think, the way you feel differently. Would that be helpful for you guys? Okay. So on a relational level, I think honesty is important, and I think intention. Going back and just saying, and I don't know where, oh, Kelly, you're still here. I just can't see you. You shared with me that you recently had a conversation with your kids, and you just owned the fact that you didn't do it the way you wish you had, and you want to do it different now. Like, that's a corrective experience. So going, into these relationships and just saying, hey, like, I know it's not where we want it to be. I know I haven't maybe been who I want to be, or we haven't figured this out, but I want to work through this with you because I care about you. And even that shows I'm engaged in well-being, and that can start to lift things. Any thoughts or questions with this, guys?
I'll say one more thing now. Sorry, it's kind of interesting with Kelly, right? Like, I wish we could see you, Kelly. But the last day, I actually had a corrective experience with Kelly, and I misunderstood something he said. And he's like, dude, you didn't hear the whole thing. And I was like, oh. And then he shared the whole thing. And I was like, oh my heck, I'm an idiot, right? I'm like, basically I thought he was mocking me for the stuff I was wearing. He's actually complimenting me for the stuff I was wearing. And he said he employs hundreds of roofers who wear that same outfit, right? I'd only heard the first part of that. And I wonder, how often in my life does that happen? Like, right. I only hear half of it, and I make my pre-resolved decisions, and they're the wrong ones, right? And so you have to go through and have that corrective. I was kind of scared to tell Kelly. He's a pretty big man, by the way, and I got to box him a little on the MMA day, and he's solid as they get. But having the courage to have that conversation opened my eyes that, like, I totally got that wrong. And dang, I don't know if that's like a corrective experience or not, but it seems like it. It seems like it is,
Yeah, right. I think it ties back into that, like, let's get a different understanding. Let's see the whole picture here. And then it creates that paradigm shift. So Shaylee and I have had a ton of these conversations where we're able to open up and help each other see it differently. I mean, there were a lot of pain in our early marriage that were based on misconceptions, things that I carried for years. And when we went back and talked about them, she's like, no, that's not what I was sending. Like, right, I misread it. And then I bought my own story, and then I got pissed off about it, right? It's like, how often does this happen in little doses every day? And so challenging our story, and if we need, go back and like, hey, is my story right? Do you really like hate my guts, or like not love me, or whatever, right? So I thought what we would end with, did anybody have questions?
I was just going to say one thing about Marty's story. It made me go back and look at what I said. He may have not misread me. I may have not said it very well. Right. I think I'm saying one thing, but really I probably said something else.
Right.
So I took it as an opportunity to look at myself and like, am I really communicating the things that I think I'm communicating?
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I think this idea of these corrective experiences so often boil down to like what I started with, like this curiosity of, am I getting the whole story, or am I buying something I'm creating? And, some of these situations are painful ones. Some of them are betrayals. Some of them are, when we're not the humans we want to be. And you guys know that I have things I can't change, like they happened. But the pain of them isn't a part of our lives anymore, because we've gone back and healed them. And I've not just apologized, but I've tried to create the opposite, right? Where once I was unsafe, now I try to be safe. Where I wasn't trustworthy, now I try to be trustworthy, right? Like, we can flip this and create this connectedness, okay? So there was one question, and I assume a lot of you can recognize this. Says, I've been changed by the fire of Rise, but I still find some strong reverting back to old destructive habits. It's been like a yo-yo roller coaster for me. Is there a way to hold longer to the highs and minimize the drops to the lows, as well as maybe even eliminate them? This seems possible. I just am struggling to see it. Anybody, resonate with that a little bit? I think for me, the key here is to be intentional. I'm very aware of my weaknesses, my potentials for falling. I'm well aware, acquainted with my demons, right? I know when they can come up. And so being focused, like, okay, I have a tendency to, whatever, to be irritable. I have a tendency to be insecure and reactive. What am I doing on a daily basis, preferably in the morning, to be aware that this is a thing and get ahead of it, right? I may have shared this with some of you. I used to get really burnt out after a long day of therapy and like really come home with nothing left for my family. It's like I'd have every intention to walk in the door and be loving and connecting, and then like something would light me up like real quick. And then I'm, you know, saying something I don't mean, or I'm snapping, and then the whole mood is different, right? And so what I started to learn to do was get ahead of it. So I still do this often. I'm able to do it quicker now, but I pull in my driveway and I envision the evening. What do I want with my wife? What do I want with my sons? What do I want with my daughter? What do I want them to feel? What do I want to feel, right? Oftentimes I do this when I come in the door. Then I oftentimes do it when I'm putting the kids to bed before I'm hanging out one-on-one with Shaylee. How do I want this to go between us, right? It's being intentional, knowing that it can go sideways if I'm not purposeful. Does that make sense? And so I think I shared the statistic that 95 to 99% of the time, it's our unconscious patterns running the show. And if those are trained wrong, right? If we got programmed with some stuff, we have to be very intentional to do it differently. And so I think that's one of the ongoing things for all of us is how do I be intentional enough where then that new pattern's written. And so like I mentioned, I can do this pretty quick now, get into that mode, walk in the door, and engage, you know, more effectively. Some of these visualizations and things that I'll keep doing and making available are going to help with that too. And I'm actually going to enlist Adam. A lot of you don't know this, but Adam is a really great therapist, and I've learned a lot from him too. And I might enlist him to share some of his tricks of the trade and just empower us more to be able to break through, you know, our emotions and our thought processes. Any other questions, guys? So one of the key things we talked about at Rise Week is this learning this ability to be in charge of our state and to shift it. So if you guys are game, I'm gonna just have you all close your eyes for a minute and I'll just run you through a little something to get your mind and your heart in a place. So I want you to think, has there ever been a time in your life where you felt totally motivated in the context of relationships? And I want you to go back in your mind to that time and ask yourself, what happened just before I was totally motivated in my relationships? Was it something negative or something I was afraid of that motivated me? Or was it something really good? Something I wanted that motivated me? And I want you to notice that the motivation to work hard in a relationship can come from fear or loss, or it can come from love and a desire to care for. The end goal might be the same, a better relationship, but how much more powerful if it's motivated by love? Now I want you to ask your mind, has there ever been a time where I felt totally confident in myself? Confident in who I am or who I could be? For some of you, this might be an experience at Rise Week where you pushed yourself, or where you grabbed a sword and put on a helmet, or you jumped off a cliff. Has there ever been a time where I felt totally confident and totally motivated to do whatever it takes to create the life and the relationships I want? And I want you to step into that experience, feeling again what it felt like to be totally motivated and to be confident and committed to be and do and have. Feeling it in your chest, feeling it in your mind, feeling it in your arms and your legs. And I'd like you to bring that emotional state back with you to now. Thinking, what can I do today to engage in a way that is corrective, that is connecting? And when you're ready, you can come back. Jason, are you willing to share what came up for you with that?
Sorry, I had to bring myself off mute again.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think for me it was like Rise Week, like you said, that was like coming. There's other times like during Rise Week, and then I think the time that stuck out most to me, honestly, was when I first got home. Just like the difference that I felt as I like embraced my wife, of like feeling comfortable and confident that you know, I could be a leader in the home. I don't feel like I ever tried to ever take that role, honestly. I think I've always like kind of had that self-hatred, like feeling of like unworthiness, not good enough, that I never tried to like be that person. And so to like be at home and like feel that confidence in like who I am and who I could be and who I could be for my wife and kids was completely eye-opening, and made a huge impact on me on and how it's been these last couple of weeks since I've been home. And so that was probably the strongest I've ever felt. That kind of confidence in who I am and who I can be was that first moment when I returned home. And so I've actually thought back to that several times since over these last couple of weeks of what that felt like and what I can be doing to try to maintain that more consistently in my relationships with my wife and kids. And it's been really helpful. I mean, not to say that I haven't had slip ups, so there's been a couple, but like overall, I feel like things that used to be triggering and flooding and things have actually been able to, I've been able to like step away from it and just kind of look at it from a different perspective because of that feeling that I had originally returning home. And it's helped a lot to go through some of these situations that we have been struggling with for a long time now.
Right. I mean, that's what we talked about day one of Rise Week, is we got to bring it home, right? And
Yeah.
this ability, like sometimes we have to go back and get that feeling again and bring it with us. And learning to do that is going to be key. How about for you, Dave? Frampton?
So it took me back to a time when it was a pretty crappy point in my life. Just shut down a business and then was working out of state and was only coming home like once or twice a month. And there came a time I was watching Katie. She had, been changing month after month. And I came home and I realized that she was in an amazing place and was doing really well, and that she could totally do it without me. And it was a true kick in the ass for me. And I was like, okay, yeah, she totally could do this without me. So made a lot of changes then, and was just thinking back to that fire that I had, and how long it lasted. And then it's almost like you get a little comfortable. It's a great reminder.
Right. Right. That goes back to that 80% thing, right? We get comfortable. We're out of the pain, but we're not really where we want to be. It's good. Jared, how about for you, man?
Yeah, I think. Sorry, can you guys hear me all right? I've got a really bad.
That sounded better.
You said you can hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I definitely went back to, some experiences at Rise Week, and there was a lot of really eye-opening things where I feel like in the past, trying to work through some things, I really thought that I had a lot more self-love and confidence than I really did. And I realized that there was so much still that I was allowing to, hold me back from like really showing up for people in my life, because I didn't feel worthy or capable, or I was, subconsciously preoccupied with so many, negative thoughts that I just didn't have the ability to, to show up in the ways that the people around me needed. And so, so that was really, kind of the place that I went. And then, since coming home from Rise Week, it's definitely been, as I shared in that video the other day, it's been, some challenges, but I still got that fire and recognize that, that confidence is where it's at. Like I need to have that love for myself, and, that confidence to be able to show up for those around me, more fully, and just trust that I can do it, and be that, as Jason was talking about, be the leader of my home, and a leader for my family.
Right. One of the things I hear from women all the time, and you guys may have experienced this some, is like, oh, he seems different, but when's the other shoe gonna drop, right? And kind of this hesitancy to reconnect. And for a lot of guys, what happens is they get pissed off that it's like, hey, can't you see I'm different, while acting the same? I've been guilty of that, right? And so, right, staying the course. This wasn't just a 4-day event for me where I went and learned some stuff. This is a time where I made a commitment to do things differently. I'm going to keep coming back to the same principles, the same effort of love, connection, care. I'm not going to shy away from the things we haven't been able to handle. And we might not get it perfect, but let's try again. Let's try again, and let's do it a little different. Okay. So I encourage you guys to spend a minute. Maybe you've already thought of this, but what can I do to engage in a way that's corrective? That's a good experience. Honestly, some of the times for me where it's the best is when I just show up playful, thoughtful, where it's just like, hey, life is good. Let's enjoy life being good, right? It doesn't have to be this deep emotional conversation about all the past. It's more like, we've been through enough stuff that's rough. Let's just have a nice hour, or a nice 10 minutes, or a nice day, right? And I think if we can believe that we can create that, right, where we're like forward thinking, how can I show my wife she matters? How can I show my kids that they matter? How can I show myself that I matter? And engage. I think that's oftentimes far more powerful than a bunch of conversations about the same stuff. So hope this is helpful for you guys. I'm testing the times. I would like to kind of get a regular, but we have the group and I don't know what that looks like yet. And so I'll post some topics and kind of a schedule. Do you guys like doing these? Is it helpful to kind of jump on here? Cool. So I'm working on kind of here's some topics, and you may not need to come to everyone, but I'll get that out in the next little while where you guys can go, oh, here's the date, here's the thing, and kind of schedule around that so it's not so impromptu. So bear with me as I figure this stuff out. So I'm glad you're here. I really care about you guys. Like, you guys doing what you do and making the changes honestly inspires me, helps me be a better man. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, Austin.
Yeah. See you guys. Have a good night.
Much love,
brother.
Dave W. Looking good, man.
All right, guys. We'll just talk. See you. Have a good night.
Build the damn boat.
I'm working on it.
Awesome. Okay, guys. Have a good night.